Good morning, Cochise County, and welcome to the Michael Zehr Show. Today's date is April 29th, 2022, and we are streaming to you live from the Warrior Healing Center, the Rising Eagles studios at the Warrior Healing Center here in Sierra Vista, Cochise County, Arizona. So today, our special veteran guest that we invited in is a fellow Knight of Columbus. So I made sure to wear my Knights of Columbus shirt today in honor of interviewing a brother knight, Doug Jakes. Doug, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming in early and sitting down with us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So to get started, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask you, like I ask all of our guests that we've had in the past, is what was it that inspired you to join the military?
Well, I come from a kind of a military family. My father was a career NCO in the Air Force. He served for 38 years
38 years
on active duty. Yeah, he did have a break in service, but he
Uh-huh.
joined the Army Air Force in 1947, and he didn't retire from the regular Air Force till 1985.
Oh wow, what was his rank?
E9.
E9,
Yeah,
Sergeant Major.
well,
Wow.
yeah, Chief Master Sergeant in the
Oh,
Air
okay.
Force. And so he did that. And looking back through my family history, I mean, I had my father was in the Korean War. My uncles were World War II. My grandfather was World War One, and my great great grandfather was in the Civil War. So none of those guys really were career soldiers, but they all did serve their country during their time of war.
Right.
So,
Wow, that's fascinating. Lots of military history.
yeah, it is.
I love hearing about stuff like that, and we could probably go into that and talk about that for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating how it carries on in generation and generation and generations. So when you enlisted, where did you enlist from? Where were you at the time?
So I went to the University of Vermont, and I had won a four-year Army ROTC scholarship. So the Army entered ROTC in 1975, and that was kind of an interesting time. Shortly, just before I graduated from high school, Saigon fell. ROTC at most campuses in the United States was made non-mandatory, so we went from over 1,100 cadets to less than 100.
Wow.
And it was kind of an very interesting time. There was still a lot of blowback from the Vietnam War. People were, yelling at us and everything else. So we kind of get a feeling somewhat for what some of the Vietnam vets went through when they came home.
Okay.
Um, so eventually I completed my college degree, and I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1979.
In 79?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was your specialty or AIT or
I
what?
was a Signal Corps officer, so I was my specialty. My MOS at the time was 25 Alpha, which was combat communications,
Okay.
tin cans and string, in other words. So
And again, what branch was this?
Signal Corps
It's in the
Army.
Army.
Yeah.
Okay. So where was your first duty station?
I was assigned to glamorous Fort Polk, Louisiana, for 4
Oh, wow.
years. Yeah, I spent 48 months there.
How did you like it there? I've heard mixed reviews.
It was an interesting place. I mean, the place was busy. They had just stood up that division, the 5th Mechanized Division, about a year before I showed up. And
Okay.
they were in the process of building a whole new post and everything else. They tore down all the wooden barracks and built all brand new buildings and everything else. So it was a challenging time because we spent a lot of time in the field just getting to know each other as units
Right.
and how to fight together and everything else. So we spent a lot of time in the field. There wasn't an awful lot else to do. I remember when they opened the first Burger King in Leesville, which is the little city outside the main gate.
You can have it your way.
Oh, that was, well, before that, the nearest fast food hamburger was in Alexandria, which was 55 miles away. So
Uh-huh.
the place was kind of isolated, and the people in the town were kind of jaded because the place had opened and closed so many times. It had been open during World War II, open during Korea, open during Vietnam.
Right.
And then after each of those wars finished, the place was closed again. So they didn't really want to invest a whole lot into stuff to take care of GIs, let's put it that way.
And you were there for how long?
48 months.
48 months.
Yeah.
And then what did you do after that?
I went to the Signal Officers Advanced Course at Fort Gordon, Georgia for about a year.
Okay.
And then I was reassigned at the end of that to Korea. I spent 2 years in Korea in the 1st Battalion, 15th Artillery at Camp Stanley. as a
Now,
signal officer.
when you finished schooling, what was your rank at that time?
When I finished, I got promoted to captain while I was at the advanced course at Fort Gordon. So I
Okay.
1983. So
And you're still in signal at that time?
yes,
Okay.
yep,
So then you go to Korea, which is that where you met your wife?
yes, it is.
Was it that tour?
Yes, yeah, that was a quite a I'll say a side benefit of that tour, but it was an
Yeah. Tell us about it.
interesting time. Well, she worked on post, and there was an interesting thing. We had periodically we would have alerts while we were there, and we would crash out to the defensive positions up near the demilitarized zone. So we had an alert one day. Everybody crashed out. Everybody went.
Right.
And I just had got out to where we were setting up, and they called me back and said, "Hey, you have a no notice security inspection. You need to go back. Right now, the guys are there waiting to inspect your crypto accounts, the safes, and all that stuff." So I went back, and needless to say, I was the only guy on post. I went up to the officers and NCOs you had to eat at your respective clubs because there wasn't enough space in the mess hall for us normally.
Okay.
So I went up to eat dinner and with nobody else in the place, and started talking to the woman who would become my wife, and we agreed to go out on a date, and then everything was there. I finally had her only person that she could focus on was me, which was strange.
Wow.
So
And what's her name?
Yang
Young?
Ok, which means morning dew. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So you want to give her a shout out or say hi? Please do. You can
Hi,
do that.
sweetheart. I love you.
Yeah. And so you're in Korea again, what year?
It was 19. I got there in January of 1984,
Okay.
and I stayed through to the end of October of 1985.
And did you get married while you were there at that tour?
Yeah, I have the interesting distinction of marrying the same woman 3 times because we got married at a civil ceremony at Seoul City Hall, which is at the time that's how you got married.
Okay.
The unit, which the battalion commander, when I had to get permission to get married from everybody from my battery commander all the way to the commanding general of the 2nd Division.
Wow.
Yeah, mounds of paperwork. But anyway, my battalion commander was thrilled by this. Like I said, that was the one thing I didn't think I was going to do over here was preside over a marriage. So they did a nice ceremony for us. They had the honor guard with crossed rifles, and they brought 2 cannons, Howitz 155 guns, crossed the barrels across the front of the church and everything else. Then I finally married her again. She converted to Catholicism, which I am, and eventually, and then we got married again in the Catholic Church. So that's our 3rd wedding.
And where were you at when you got married at the Catholic Church? Was that also there in Korea?
I was stationed at Fort Drum. That's where
Fort Drum? Okay.
Yeah, I went to Fort Drum from Korea. Just starting up the 10th Mountain Division at that time. There was 22 guys in the entire division. So you could get everybody in one little room on a Friday afternoon.
So going back to Korea, so you met your wife, you got married, and you were there for 2 years, did you say?
2 years, yeah.
I remember when I was sitting down talking with you one time at bingo, you showed me a picture where you were right there on the DMZ, and you had some really interesting stories to share then.
Yeah, we used to rotate. The artillery units used to rotate. You were assigned your direct support to one of the infantry or mechanized units in the 2nd Division. So we supported the 1st Battalion, 17th Infantry. And they would rotate to the DMZ roughly every 90 days or so, and we would have to go up with them to provide fire support should it come to that.
Right.
We couldn't get the heavy guns across the Imjin River. The bridge wasn't heavy enough to carry them. So they had a battery of 105s just outside of what was called Warrior Base, which is where the DMZ battalion stayed. And it was called 4 Papa 1. So we would man the guns at 4 Papa 1. Forward observers would go out with the infantry units and basically camp out with them. There was 2 guard posts Collier and guard post Willette.
Right.
Guard post Willette, the perimeter fence was the military demarcation line between North and South Korea. And so one of the things you had to do when you first got up there was to intrude and provocate into the peaceful DPRK. So you would walk up to the barbed wire fence, which was about 12 feet high, and you'd stick the toes of your boots under the lowest rung of the wire, so your toes of your shoes were in North Korea officially. So
wow.
So that was an interesting, spookiest place I've ever been.
Was there any successful defectors from North Korea that came in over?
Actually, while I was stationed there, we had a Russian that defected in Panmunjom. There's a very little known incident that occurred in which one U.S. soldier was seriously wounded, 2 or 3 South Korean soldiers were killed, and a whole bunch of North Koreans were killed. There's this Russian guy defected in Panmunjom. He
Okay.
ran across the stripe asking for asylum. The North Koreans chased him into our sector of the DMZ, and they were shooting at the guy. So the guard force guys returned fire.
Wow. So there was live fire.
Oh
Because I
yeah,
was going to ask you about that.
yeah. Oh no, that was live fire. You couldn't go into what was called the South Barrier without locking and loading. You had to have a weapon, and you had to be locked and loaded. So
And didn't you tell me at times when you were there, you'd be walking along at night, or and there would be like random pot shots every now and then from the other
yeah,
side, or
it was funny how that stuff occurred. I mean, we would, it's night up there is very dark, obviously, and very in the summertime when the last time I went up was raining and it was monsoon season. Korea gets a
right,
true monsoon, so you're on patrol. You're hanging on to the guy in front of you is basically the back of his web gear. You got your weapon up in on safe, but your fingers are right by the selector switch,
right,
and you've been assigned a sector to open fire if we get assaulted. So during the day, there was 3 reconnaissance patrols of ours, and at night there was 3 ambushes set. So that was on one of the ambushes one time, and again, it's very spooky. There's flares going off. There's shots going off. There's the propaganda speakers from both sides are going like full bore around the
wow,
clock, yelling at each other. There's a huge statue of, well, I don't know if it's still there or not, but at one time there was a huge statue of Kim Il Sung stepping on the neck of an American soldier,
oh wow,
and that was lit around the clock. And the village of Kaesong was in North Korea, which was hilarious because they wanted to give the impression that it was occupied. Well, they had these things that looked like pop-up targets, so faces would pop up into a window and they'd sit there for like 30 seconds and they'd fall down and another one would pop up over here.
wow,
So yeah, the propaganda war was really intense. And the thing you always remembered is that there was only one bridge across the river, and if they came across, we were going to blow that bridge. So you
okay,
better be able to swim, because we were going
wow,
to have to get back across the Imjin River somehow. So yeah, it was a strange and interesting experience. It's the guys that used to do that all the time. God bless their souls. I mean, that's a stress is there. My battalion commander, who was a great guy, he was a 2-tour Vietnam vet. He had been as a forward observer and then as a battery commander. And he said, this place is more stressful than Vietnam was. He said,
holy cow.
he said, you never know when you're going to get hit here. So,
Well, and I've said this a couple of times when I've talked with other veterans. It seems like our Vietnam veterans got treated very badly when they came home. Uh, our country made up for it with Desert Storm and
mm-hmm.
Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff like that. But Korean War vets, nothing. World War II
Yeah.
vets got, you know, but Korea is like nothing.
My dad was somewhat bitter about that. He spent 3 years there in Korea. He was in Korea basically the day the war started. His squadron escorted MacArthur's plane into Suwon Airfield
Wow.
on June 26, 1950. And he basically had pictures of him there sleeping with his toolbox and his M1 carbine and his helmet, sleeping on the wing of his plane to defend it. There was no troops in Korea at that time.
Right.
No American troops. So they stayed there, eventually retreated from little airbase to little airbase all the way down to Pusan. And then that was about the end of 1950 that his unit was they were flying propeller aircraft, P-51 Mustangs.
Right.
And eventually they got re-equipped with jets. And when they got jets, they were restationed in Japan. He went to base just Johnson Air Base, which was just outside of Tokyo. And he spent 2 more years there. So he spent 37 months, I think he said, in the Korean thing. Presidential unit citation from both the U.S. government and the Korean government, 4 battle stars on his Korean War ribbon. And I said, nobody even thinks about us.
No.
And I know he was a crew chief.
Sadly.
He was a crew chief, and he had planes that didn't come back. Guys
Mhm.
would take off and go on a mission and not come back. So you never knew if they got shot down, they crashed, what happened, but they just didn't come back. And I knew that bothered him a lot.
Yeah. And we do have some Korean War veterans that do come in through the center here, and we just talk to them and
Yeah.
treat them like any other veteran and respect them for their service and what they've done for our country and did. And it's amazing.
You know, very little. I mean, if you start, I didn't really even read to know what happened during the Korean War till after I was stationed there. I started reading some of the books and the official military histories, and you don't realize how hard that war was fought. I think the official toll of actually killed in combat is around 38,000. Well, if you that was in 3 years. So if you extrapolated that out to the 10 years like we spent in Vietnam, we would have been probably in the hundreds of thousands of casualties. The fighting was that bitter and that hard during most of the war.
America, we lost that many troops in
Oh
that
yeah,
3 years.
I think the total count was something like 56,000 from all causes. But yeah, I want to say the total count was 38,000 casualties. So,
What were the years that well, not conflict, it was war. I don't know why I said conflict. Sorry about that.
the police action. My
Yeah.
father used to start down the
But what do you remember what the years were from that by chance?
1950 to June 1950 to July 1953.
Okay, so it was
basically
3.
just like 3 years. Yeah.
So then your dad was there practically the whole time.
He was the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
They didn't rotate soldiers in and out at that time.
You were there. They started a point system, but it was toward the end of the war, so it really applied to the guys in combat units. I guess they didn't really think a whole lot of the Air Force guys. And once my dad was out of Korea, he was pretty much out of any direct threat to him. You know, he was also a flight engineer, so he would fly on cargo planes and stuff like that to take care of the planes. But yeah, it's a kind of a strange thing.
So going back to you meeting your wife in Korea, you got married, and what's going on there? You were there for 2 years, you said, and then from there you went to where?
Went to Fort Drum, New York.
Oh, you did say that.
Yeah, my dad was pretty ill. He had a bad heart attack in 1984, and so the Army gave me a compassionate reassignment to Fort Drum. My folks were from Vermont, and my dad was working with the Vermont Air Guard at the time, so
Okay.
I was able to get Fort Drum was about 150 miles from where I lived. That was the closest military installation that had troops at it. So I spent 5 years there at Fort Drum.
So what's it like, or what do you have to do as a soldier to have when you marry somebody in a foreign country and you want to bring them into our country? What is that? What's that process like?
Well, at the time I got married, it was I think it's a little bit more streamlined, and it's also, since 9/11, a lot of the regulations have changed. But I had to get, in her case, since I had a top secret clearance at the time, I had to get her family registered back 100 years. The Koreans keep what's called a family book, and it records all the births and deaths and all the history of the family. Wow. So I had to get a copy of that in Korean and then take it to a translator, a certified translator, have it translated into English, and basically do a mountain of paperwork, as I said, to get permission to marry from everybody from my battery commander, who was actually junior to me, all the way up to the division commander.
Wow.
And then take the stuff down to 8th Army, which was in Seoul, and file all that. So you spend half a day in Seoul doing that paperwork. My wife's was pretty much the same thing, because she had to get all her family stuff done. Koreans all have a national ID card, so that has to all match all the paperwork and everything else. That gets you married, and then you go over to, once you're married at Seoul City Hall by the mayor of Seoul, you go to the American embassy, and I met the consul general.
Okay.
Basically, he records your marriage. He said, you realize you're married now. He said, I don't marry you. I just record it in here. And what that does when you record your marriage is that it speeds her ability to emigrate into the United States. And plus, if you have any kids, then you can get them a U.S. passport when they're born.
Okay.
So the marriage has been, they already know about it. And that's basically, we also had, my first child was born in Korea, which was kind of a funny thing. If you ever watched the show MASH,
yes.
Remember they talked about
I love that show.
Remember talked about the 8063rd MASH? My child was almost born at the 8063rd. The 8063rd was in Uijeongbu.
Wow.
And it closed shortly thereafter. And then my wife was evac down to the 121st evac hospital in Seoul. And that's where my child was born.
It was a girl, daughter?
My oldest daughter was
Yeah.
born there. Yeah.
And when she's born in Korea, does she get dual citizenship?
At the time, no.
No?
I had 48 hours to get her birth certificate and paper and passport application to the embassy and get her registered. Otherwise, she automatically became a Korean citizen.
Oh, okay.
And the U.S., I guess at that point in time, they did not recognize dual citizenship, but they do now.
They do now?
Yeah,
Okay.
as far as I know, they do now.
So you go to Fort Drum,
Yep.
and you've got a wife and a young baby at that
Yep.
time, and you're at Fort Drum for how long?
I got there in the fall of 1985, and I got out of the military in February of 1990. So I was there for almost 5 years.
And what did you do at Fort Drum? What were some of the things that you did there?
Well, it was kind of interesting because there was nothing there, and our job for the guys that first showed up was to build a new Fort Drum. Basically, the Army built a whole new installation, the first thing that had been done since World War II. $1.1 billion construction project to build a whole new, take 4,000 acres of training area and build a whole new post. Barracks, roads, sewers, communications infrastructure, everything. So I wound up, since I had a technical background, I wound up in the master planner's office for about 2 years. And that was my job, was to review plans and to look at different. I was assigned to, for example, some of the communications infrastructure to make sure that was going to be adequate to meet the needs of the new stuff.
Right.
The Army also decided to make that one of the first automated places. And granted, the automation that we had back then is nothing compared to what's today.
Correct.
But all the stuff, all the buildings were all wired to be able to have computers and terminals in there. So we were kind of looking forward to everything had a master plan. The place also had a design theme because there was a lot of history associated with that area. I can't remember. I think it's Madison Barracks. But anyway, that Sackett's Harbor, which is just a little bit west of Fort Drum, was a base that had been there since the Revolutionary War. And so we took elements of the design of those buildings and transferred that to the new Fort Drum. We got a lot of smart things were done when they built that place. We looked at, for example, economies of scale. What we did is arranged it with the architects so that the guys that are building the buildings, only had to buy one size of steel girder, for example.
Okay.
Everything had the barracks were all a certain size, and they only had to buy, instead of having to buy 50 different sizes, he only had to buy one. So there was a lot of money saved by doing that. And so it worked out pretty good. The place was a showpiece. That's kind of funny to think that's now, almost 30, 40 years old now.
Yeah.
Approaching that.
When you were there at that time, what was the MACOM at Fort Drum?
Well, 10th Mountain was the division, but it really didn't have any troops assigned to it. The first combat units that activated, which was the 2nd Brigade, activated at Fort Benning because we had no place to put the troops at Fort Drum at that time.
Okay.
There was a lot of World War II barracks there, but they certainly didn't meet the modern standards for housing troops. So those buildings had to be rehabilitated to be able to bring troops into them. We then stood up the 1st Brigade in 1987. So Fort Drum at that time, 10th Mountain, was designed as what was called a roundout division. So you only had 2 active brigades. Our 3rd Brigade was the 27th Infantry Brigade from the New York National Guard. And so that was, those guys would come up and train periodically when they were on, their summer camp and stuff like that. So
when you mentioned 10th Mountain, it kind of reminds me of a story that I vaguely remember, that my daughter's father-in-law was with 10th Mountain, and I thought he said that they were in Somalia.
Yes, they were. If you watch Black Hawk Down, one of the units that went to try to get the Rangers out in Mogadishu was from the 10th Mountain.
10th Mountain. Oh, okay.
I have a good friend that came back from that with 2 AK-47 holes in his left leg. So,
oh, my.
Yeah.
And that was in the 90s, right?
That was right after I got out. So, yeah, the first thing they did was go into Haiti when they had the Haitian government fell. And then they also went into Somalia. And I want to say it's probably like 91 or so, somewhere in that ballpark, 90,
right.
91. So, yeah.
Wow. And Fort Drum is still open today, is it not?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's still there. In fact, they had, during the OEF and OIF period, they had, I want to say, 4 brigades, and the 4th Brigade was actually assigned to Fort Polk.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that was kind of strange how
Kind
that
of come
worked
around
out.
full
But
circle for you a little bit.
yeah, it is. It's really strange. I went to work after I got out of the Army as a DA civilian, and where was my first project at? Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
So I was down work down there for off and on for the better part of 2 years. So
So when you got out of the Army, how many years had you had in at that time?
just under 11.
11?
Yeah, I couldn't pass a physical anymore. I had got hurt in a
Okay.
training accident in 1985. I had a piece of a tower come down and hit me.
Oh,
And
wow.
the signal corps at that time was if you were a 25A combat guy, you had to meet the same physical criteria as an infantryman. You had to be Cat 1A. You couldn't have any profiles. And so I had a permanent profile, which was the kiss of death. And
Yeah.
being a reserve officer, it was very simple for them to say have a nice day, because they didn't have to go through a board of officers or anything. It's like, okay, well, you serve at the pleasure of the president and his pleasure is expired, so have a nice day, go home. So, which is pretty much what I did. So
Right. So didn't you go into the reserves? Did you tell me?
well, I was transferred. I was a reserve officer on active duty, so they basically transferred me from active duty status to the IRR for individual ready reserve for 2 years.
Okay.
I had no service obligation, and I wanted to continue in the IRR. At the same time, the VA was looking at all my stuff. The period when I got out, the Army really wasn't doing PEBs and all that, physical evaluation boards and
Right.
stuff. They're basically saying, yeah, if you're broken, go see the VA, have a nice day.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I went to see the VA, and they wrote me off at like 20% disabled at the time. And so when the Army saw that, they retired me from the reserve. It's an interesting thing. I'm what's called a gray area retiree. I had enough time in service to retire, but since I didn't spend like 10 years in a troop unit,
Right.
a reserve unit, I will not get TRICARE or any reserve pay.
So do you get, but you have the VA.
You have the VA, and they also give you a retired ID card.
Okay.
But it's stamped on the back, no TRICARE, no
Right.
other benefits. So you can use the PX and commissary and such.
So when you went to the VA and they did an evaluation on
Yeah.
you, what was that like for you? That, because I went through that myself, and I know that it's not a fun process to go through.
That wasn't the kinder, gentler VA that's out there today.
Right.
This was they sent me to Syracuse because I live close to there, and actually the VA guys sent me over to Syracuse University, and those guys were like, "Well, you're a young guy." I was like 31 or 32.
Right.
So we don't want to saddle you with a disability at this time. You'll never get a job. Humana. So they gave me 20%. Well, the irony was everybody forgot about that. I went back to school on my own. I went to the State University of New York in Utica. I was working on an engineering degree, and I was just about to finish. And then one day I got a call from the VA, and they said, "Hey, we screwed up. We owe you voc rehab, because you've been out, your degree that you had is 12 years old, you've never worked in the field, so basically it's
Right.
useless, and you're over 20% are over disabled." I said, "Well, they're kind of great because I'm in my last semester."
Yeah.
So, "Well, you got all your bills?" I said, "As a matter of fact, yes, and I have no idea how I'm going to pay them because I had financed my college education on my MasterCard. So I owed MasterCard like about $10,000.
Okay.
And so I went down and saw the gentleman, and it makes you. A lot of people have a lot of bad opinions about the VA. The guys that I worked with were spectacular. The gentleman in Syracuse that handled my case he'd got shot in the spine in Vietnam. He was in a wheelchair.
Wow.
The guy that used to come and check on my progress at school had got shot in the face. He had a glass eye. It's just disgusting that they couldn't even give him something that looked like a doll's eye. Really, I mean, it was a piece of plastic with like a doll's eye stuck to it. So anyway, they reviewed it, and the guy said, "We'll pay you. We're going to pay back all your expenses effective to the date that your disability rating was."
Wow, that's great.
Oh, it was. I was like, "Thank you." I mean, that you just took I had no idea how I was going to pay this back.
Yeah, that's a huge chunk.
I was working for a subsidiary of GM up there, building electric motors for cars and stuff, and it was like, with the pay that I was getting, it was like, yeah, it's going to take me 99 years to my kids are going to pay off this debt because they'll never be able to pay off this blessed credit card.
So how did you? So what I wanted to ask you was, so
Okay,
you got involved in or enrolled in the VA healthcare system at that
yeah.
time back there, and then how did you end up getting here at Fort Huachuca?
Well, I got hired when I got my degree. I was applying for civil service jobs. That was kind of my plan because the civil service. I mean, yeah, the retirement system had changed from CSRS, which was a great system, to FERS, which is the current system. The benefits are there, but they're not good. But the only thing that was nice about it is I could apply my military service to my civil service career
Right.
by buying, but you can buy back what they call buy back your time. So I did that. So instead of on day one of being hired, instead of having 1 day of job on the job experience, I had 11 years.
Wow.
So, and that affects your
That's
pay,
great.
that affects
Yes.
your leave status, your sick leave, and everything else. How
What
much
was
you
your
accrue.
GS rating?
So I started as a GS5 intern.
But didn't because of all the years that you had in, didn't you start out at like a higher step?
No,
No?
no.
Okay.
That's all they could offer me. And the guys over here told me, and I said, "Yeah, we're sorry." It was there was kind of a rift going on at that time. They hadn't hired anybody. I
Okay.
went to work at the electronic proving ground. They hadn't hired anybody since around 1987, I think they said. So this was 1995, and but I was able to move up fairly fast, being an intern. That's a fast track program.
Okay.
So within 5 years, I was a GS13. So
Wow.
yeah,
And what as a GS13, what did you do? You were responsible.
I was an electronics engineer. So
Okay.
basically, I wound up as EPG is a test activity.
Right.
So I was assigned to all kinds of different things: laser testing. I was assigned to training systems. To computer system software testing, whatever they needed somebody to do, they could use me as long as it was within my skill set. So
When you had shared with us that the Department Army civilian, right?
yep.
And that you got 11 years credit for prior service,
Mm-hmm.
then does that count towards your retirement?
Yes, it
For when you
most certainly does. That's why you buy it back. But that's why you
okay.
have to buy it back, because what you're doing when you buy it back, excuse me, is to put in the amount of retirement. You have to pay civil service. You have under FERS, you have to contribute a certain amount toward your own retirement. So what you're doing is making up for that time period. They'll give you the 11 years, but you have to pay into the retirement system the amount that you would have paid in as a civilian. So in my case, it wound up, and by the way, they charge interest. So in my case, it wound up being around $7,800 to buy back that 11 years, plus about $3,000 in interest.
But it was worth it,
Oh,
right?
well, certainly, because the difference when you figure your retirement pension, it's your number of years of service. So I would have had 24 instead of 34 years. I wound up at 34 years and like 8 months of service.
Which
When
gives
I
you a
retired.
higher amount of pay.
Exactly,
Right.
because it's the multiplier in the equation where they figure your pension.
So if you are a veteran and you're watching this and you're working for Department of Army civilians and or you're thinking about getting a job for civil service, you might want to keep that in mind because it's
Yeah, and it's funny to keep track of all that stuff. My daughter, actually, my oldest daughter now works for the VA in Reno. She's the pharmacist, the infectious disease pharmacist for the VA hospital in Reno. But
wow.
she worked for DECA in the produce department at the commissary as a student.
Uh-huh.
And when she got hired, they said, "Oh, by the way, that all counts." All that time she had worked for DECA
Yeah.
for like 4 or 5 years, and so that accounted for gave her 5 years on the job. But that's again the same day she got hired.
So you were GS 13
Yeah.
and what year did you retire from that?
I retired in 2018.
In 2018, so that's
Yeah.
not too long
No,
ago.
made 4 years in March, to be exact.
And you and your wife liked it so much, you just decided to stay here, huh?
Well, I mean, we've been here since 1995. We own our house outright.
Okay.
So yeah, where will we move? I don't know. We've talked about moving somewhere to be closer to my kids. My oldest daughter's in Reno. My middle daughter's in San Francisco,
Uh-huh.
and my youngest right now is in Scottsdale. So we're looking at figuring where we're going to eventually settle should we decide to. We have almost too much house for what we need now.
Yeah.
A 4 bedroom. So
Well,
excuse
I
me.
would hate to see our community lose you, though.
Yeah,
That's a thing.
it's
But
hard, and it's like you get to the point now where I told my wife, if you want to do it, we need to do this in the next couple of years. So don't come asking me when I hit 70 to move somewhere. It's going to be too late by then. So
well, family is definitely important. And then
yeah,
when you have 3 daughters, and what are their names? Give them a shout out
my
here.
oldest daughter's Kimberly, my middle daughter's Stephanie, and my youngest daughter is Brittany. So
Kimberly, Stephanie, and Brittany.
yeah,
All right, great. So they're in kind of like a 3 point
yeah.
area, so you could maybe just find an area in the middle somewhere. And
We were looking at Reno, and except Reno is now like Eastern California, and the prices
oh
there
no,
are absolutely ridiculous of
yeah,
housing. I mean, a house like we have here in Sierra Vista that's valued at around 200,000 up there is probably around 700,000. So Tesla built that big battery factory up there, and so the whole
wow,
population has just exploded up there.
isn't that crazy?
It is. We went and looked at a house when we were up there last summer, and this guy's like, "Well, we're sold out, and we have a waiting list. We'll put you on the waiting list." And it's like, "Well, where would we be if we signed up today?" So you'd be number 87 for 35 houses that we're going to build.
Wow.
So yeah, it's like, don't bother. Never
I
mind.
went to Reno with a friend one time, and I love to bowl,
Mm.
and so they needed somebody for this bowling tournament. So they just said, well, we need somebody. Come along, we'll take you. And I went up there, and they had this national bowler stadium, or I forget what it's actually called, but it's beautiful bowling stadium in Reno. And when you walk in there, it's like this just huge arena.
Mm.
This and seats behind. I don't know if you ever been there or
Yeah,
know where it's
no.
at, but if any of you guys or gals bowl, and if you've ever been to Reno and been to the stadium, you know what I'm talking about. And this tournament that I got to bowl in, it was so fascinating because they marched us out to gladiator music. I just thought, oh man, that was so
Yeah,
cool. So I just wanted to share that. That was my little story with
yeah.
Reno, which is the city. What is it? The lights. I forget. It's like it's got the what their nickname is for in Reno. It's like
Oh,
the little
something like the best little city in the world or something like
yeah,
that.
or and it has something to do with the brightest lights or something.
Yeah.
I forget. I have to Google it now and see what it was. So, what are some of the community things that you do here in Cochise County to help out our community?
Well, once I retired, I had one of those jobs where I was on the road a lot. There was a period, for example, the last project I had from 2014 until I retired, I was on the road generally about 2 to 3 weeks a month.
Okay.
So I wasn't here very much. My project was out at Fort Irwin. So when I got done with that, I said, it's time to start looking at something to give back. So several friends of mine were in the Knights of Columbus, so I joined the Knights.
Okay.
I've also, if you're familiar with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with how this stuff is. So the Knights of Columbus basically are formed in groups called councils, and they have 3 basic degrees, which are now kind of being all merged into
Into
one.
one, right?
Yeah. There's also what they call the 4th degree, and the 4th degree is the patriotic degree, and that's a separate group of guys that get together, and these guys are from all over the county. So we have the 4th degree assembly covers not just Sierra Vista, but Bisbee, Tombstone,
Benson. Yeah.
Benson, Safford, Morenci,
Yeah.
guys all over this part of the county, and actually into Graham and Greenlee counties to some extent. So I've joined them, and we have a building. The Knights at one time had a hall. The Knights decided about 5-6 years ago to get out of the building business, so they transferred it over to a corporation. So we formed a corporation called the
Right.
Columbian Association. So I'm also president of the Columbian Association this year,
Yep.
and that runs the bingo hall, basically the bingo hall and banquet hall down on Cayetan Avenue. So.
And you're the Oh, Lord help me.
So I'm the lecturer for the
Thank you,
council.
the lecturer.
I'm the faithful captain for the assembly, and then I'm the president of the Columbian
Okay.
Association. So
Because how I had met you was obviously I'd seen you going to Mass,
mhm.
but I hadn't had that personal friendship experience, but that
Yeah,
brotherhood until I joined the Knights. And then when I joined the Knights of Columbus, I'm like, wow, what can I do? Because being disabled, I couldn't.
yeah,
At that time, Bryant was doing the food boxes, and you guys were going around to all these different houses. Now, keep in mind, these are not people that have to be Catholic or even have to be Christian or whatever. These are just community people in our community
yeah.
that need help.
Mhm.
Somebody needs their grass cut, or uh, I don't know. Can you give me some other
Well,
examples of
we'll
what?
get called by the city a lot of times where they're about ready to
Yeah,
cite somebody for their to clean have their because their property doesn't meet appearance standards or whatever, and basically to keep that those folks, especially if they're excuse me,
uh huh,
if they're older or disabled or whatever, keep them from getting fined over something they don't have the ability to do. They'll call us, and we'll
right.
go over and do the work for them.
And they
Excuse me.
don't charge for it. They do
No,
that out of the because a it's just the Christian and it's the neighborly thing
it's
to do.
exactly, yeah, and that's the same thing. We built wheelchair ramps for people. We've
Yes,
helped convert their houses over to barrier free design when possible. So a lot of things like that. A lot of little things that don't
yeah,
really get noticed by a whole lot of people, but have an impact on who we are helping.
right.
So
And I was talking to another brother Knight yesterday, and he was telling me he's going over to build some steps for somebody because their steps had dry
mhm,
rotted out, and it would just be easier instead of repairing them. He's just going to build them a brand new
yeah,
set of steps. So that was pretty cool.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I had met Doug here after I said I couldn't find my niche with the Knights, and I didn't want to be one of those where you pay your membership and just sit and
yes,
don't do nothing. I wanted to do something. So somehow I got involved in bingo, and that's how I met you and
yeah,
established a
yeah.
personal friendship. And I got to tell you, I love doing bingo, man. I look forward to that. That's just working bingo. That's so much fun.
Yeah, and that's again, that's a totally a nonprofit activity. So the money that we raise from that goes to various agencies here in town. We give some to
Yep,
the Knights. We give some. Actually, one of our groups that helps us out now with that is the Sierra Vista Symphony. So
yep,
we basically donate to them. We're not allowed to pay workers for that, so we have to get volunteers for
right.
all the positions that we have, and it takes some amount of of wanting to donate a couple nights a month to come and do the job. So
Because how it works, right? The Columbian Association basically pays on behalf of the volunteer to whatever
we
organization
make it, yeah, we
you would
officially
like that.
to keep us straight with the
Yeah,
state, we make a charitable donation
right.
to their organization.
So even
Because
though I'm working for free, I'm still earning money for another
you're
charitable organization.
exactly, yeah,
So
we're free what we're required to do under the state laws is to take the profits or what the money that we make and immediately or as soon as possible redistribute it to another nonprofit agency that and they allow us to say it says it's in alignment with your corporate goals and
right.
objectives. So that's
And
pretty
the
much
thing that's
all that's
great
done.
about it, like you mentioned, the Sierra Vista Symphony, because that's a good fundraiser for them.
Yeah,
To help them to raise money. Another one of them is Heritage Girls,
American Heritage
American
Girls,
Heritage
the
Girls. There's a Boy
Cub
Scouts, Cub
Scouts,
Scouts.
Boy Scouts. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so there's
all
a
of
lot
those
of
groups.
worthy
Yeah,
organizations that day. So you are president on the what we call the KBOD, and
right.
you're the lecturer on the nights. And what I love about Doug when he does his lecturing is he always finds something and reads it each month in one of our meetings. And I have it here. I didn't pull it up. I'm sorry, but I really like the one that you shared with us last month.
I have to
Uh,
think of that. I'm trying
I
to think
know. I wish I had pulled it up
yeah.
here, but what Doug does is that each month he shares a very inspirational story about.
Oh, Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
and the his definition of grace, which is
yes, grace.
yeah, And specifically, what he talked about is cheap grace, which is thinking that by
That's it.
simply going to church and saying, "Well, geez, I'm a Christian," then that you're doing things that God wants you to do. And it's like he said, it's hard to be a true Christian because you really have to live your life the way Christ lived his, and there's not
Right.
very many people that are out there willing to do that. So
What else is there within the nights you could think of? There's not that that doesn't keep you busy enough
yeah.
as it is.
No, that's the big things with that. We also host the dinners for the various three big nonprofit agencies, which is the Good Neighbor Alliance, CareNet. I'm having a brain dump. I can't remember the third one at the moment. But basically, during the year when they decide to hold their fundraisers or their events,
Right.
we host them at the Columbian Association Hall. And the nights generally help out serving dinner, setting up the building, doing that kind of stuff
And for
the
those of you
agencies.
that don't know, the Good Neighbor Alliance, what they do is they help a lot of the homeless people in our
Right.
community, right? And then CareNet, they help
They're
me out with that. I don't want to screw
they're
up
there for the unborn. They
for the
basically
unborn.
they take help mothers who are pregnant and considering abortion, or they've had a child and they're having a hard time supporting them. So they're taking care of
Right.
those folks.
And
So
they also help support throughout the state, if not all over the place, with the ultrasound machines and stuff
right,
too, right?
that's a Knights of Columbus initiative. Yes,
Yeah.
to buy those.
So they do quite a bit of good stuff. Not to toot our own horn, but I'm just
Yeah.
so glad that I joined the Knights of Columbus because it's really given me a focus of family, well, God first, community and family, not necessarily in that order, except for God at the top. But
Well, that's one of the things when you look at a lot of the guys that are in there. I mean, none of us is young. I mean, we surely could use some younger guys.
yes,
But those guys that I've noticed over the past 4 or 5 years that I've been a knight now, they're willing to give everything they have to go help somebody else out. I mean, they don't have to be begged, prodded, or kicked. They'll just do it, and that's hard to find anymore. Is somebody who's able to do that or willing to do that.
right. And then I also wanted to share with our viewers that on Thursday, May 19th, when we have our next Bagels and Brew, that's going to be sponsored by the Knights of Columbus.
Mm.
So if you're watching this and if the Knights of Columbus is kind of speaking to your heart, maybe think that you're something that you'd like to get more information on, you have to be, in order to join the Knights, you do have to be Catholic, correct? You have to be
Yes, you need to
Catholic in good
practice
stand,
that. Yeah.
practicing Catholic. But there will be people there at the Bagels and Brew that if you'd like more information, uh, just ask. I mean,
Yeah.
we're always willing to happy to share and enlighten people or give them information. So, uh, do you have any last thing that you'd like to share with anybody?
No, again, I know it's fairly easy, especially like Mike is saying, if you're disabled. The VA, I found after after about 30 years, the VA finally decided that I'm totally disabled as well. Not a lot of visible physical damage, but a lot of stuff inside that's really screwed up from that accident. I
Right,
gotten arthritis, so it's really easy to collapse into yourself and not think about the world around you and to lose touch with it. My advice to anybody who's in that situation is to join one of the fraternal organizations, whichever one it is you choose to do, and get out and share your life. It's the only one you're ever going to have, so
yep.
you choose how you're going to deal with it. So,
And I'd like to expand on that a little bit and say that if you're a veteran, a lot of us veterans never wanted to be labeled the sick call
yeah,
sickies, so we would never go on sick call when there was something wrong with us, right thing. So just because you don't think it's documented in your medical records when you were on active duty, that doesn't mean that you can't file for disability.
yeah.
So go in to see the Disabled American Veterans, go to the American Legion, the VFW, the people up at the cemetery on Fort Huachuca. There's all of these different service organizations that will help you file a claim for free.
Yep.
And you don't know if you don't try. So don't be one of those people that's like, well, it's not for me, or I'm not going to do it. You need to get up off your butt, and you need to get in there, and you need to get it done before it's too late.
Exactly. For years, that describes my own situation. I was almost embarrassed to actually have to go and to file the stuff. It's like it was not the way I was raised. It was not the culture of the military when I was in it, and it was like, yeah, I pretty much had to be kicked by my wife, saying, "You need to get your butt down there
Yes.
and have them look at you." And all they did was look at my military records and look at my current physical records, and it's like, yeah, okay. It helps with the VA with the process if you're able to connect the dots for them.
Yep.
And I was able to connect all the dots.
Well, and that's a perfect example, like on your DD Form 214, what you will need to have. You may have been in Vietnam.
Mm.
You may have symptoms of Agent Orange, but you never went and got it treated,
Exactly.
or you never went on sick call or anything, but now here you are. Well, you know what? That's connecting the dot, like Doug just said, because on your DD form, you can prove that you were in service. I'm just using this one as an example. Yeah. And then you may have like bladder cancer, ischemic heart disease. There's so many different determinations now for Agent Orange.
There's a lot of stuff for Iraq and Afghanistan as well.
Yes.
If you've been there.
Burn pits.
Yeah, burn pits, PTSD. I mean, it. I know it still ranks with a lot of guys to say, well, something's bothering me and I need to go seek help about it. But don't, attend to it. That's all I can say. Don't let it build up inside yourself because it'll poison you.
And just because you need help doesn't mean that you're weak.
Exactly.
I mean, sometimes I think that you have to do that self-examination inside. And then if you just don't feel like you're getting the help you need, then seek it. And I know that's what the Warrior Healing Center is here for. They welcome all veterans and their families. You come in the door, you sit down, you fill out an intake form. Beth will get that intake form like that, and you'll hear back from them within a few days. So yes, by all means, if you're feeling like you need to do something and you maybe don't know where to go or where to start, come here to the Warrior Healing Center, and that is the start. So Doug, thank you so much for sitting down and joining me today. I appreciate it. Want to hang out real quick? I got a couple of announcements here to read real quick, and then we'll be done for today. So a few of the announcements, things that are happening here at the Warrior Healing Center to let you know about today, starting at 1600 hours, going to 1800 hours is the Gratitude Drum Circle. I've watched Beverly and Max, and I can't remember some of the other people's names, so please don't be upset with me, but they go outside and they play the drums, and it's very soothing and calming, and so if you're looking for something interesting or just come up to watch, come up today here at the Warrior Healing Center starting at 1600 hours. So tomorrow night, starting at 1900 hours, for those of you that love to sing, there's karaoke at the American Legion Post 52. So come on out again, that's Saturday, tomorrow, starting at 1900 hours. Also Saturday, boy, karaoke must be a big hit tomorrow. At 2000 hours, going to 2100 hours, is the RWB, which is the Red, White, and Blue karaoke, and they're having theirs over at the Horned Toad. So now you got two different places you can go for karaoke tomorrow. You can go to the American Legion, or you can go to the Horned Toad. On Sunday is the RWB hike, and that's going to be Ramsey and Brown Canyon Loop, and they're going to be meeting at 799 East Ramsey Canyon Road, and that's out there in Hereford. Also on Monday, May 2nd, can't believe May is already upon us. We have, starting at 1730 hours, the 5 Treasures of Qigong. And on Tuesday, May 3rd, starting at 0900 to 1200 hours. And then again at 13 to 1600 hours, we have the Healing with Art. It's stenciling, spectacular stenciling at the Warrior Healing Center, and that will be in the main conference room. On Tuesday, May 3rd, starting at 1800 hours and going to 1900 hours, is the Hero Paws Service Animal Support Group taking place here at the Warrior Healing Center. And last but definitely not least, we have on May 3rd, starting at 1830, going to 1930, we have the AMVETS Post 89 meeting, which will be taking place right here at the Warrior Healing Center. So that's it for today's show. Again, thank you all for joining us. And if you weren't able to join us live, and if you're watching it delayed, if you put anything down in the comments section, we usually like to reply to those. I keep an eye on them, try to watch for them. So go ahead and comment down there, and we'll try to be interacting with you if you have any questions for us. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Doug, again,
Mike,
thank you. God bless you for coming down this morning. We appreciate it. All right, Cochise County, you guys take care and have a great weekend now. Bye-bye.
Bye.